Today on the podcast, we welcome Dr. Alice Penn. She's an expert speaker and an executive and career coach specializing in helping people through transition. Formerly a sought-after medical doctor for over 10 years to a C-suite executive in London, with a desire to step into her own true potential, Alex went on to accomplish what many said was impossible. She pivoted successfully from clinical medicine into corporate finance consulting at one of the big four firms in London. Now with a passion for neuroscience and as a certified brain coach, Alice is a master in the art and science of change. Alice coaches high-achieving professionals to overcome feeling stuck and disillusioned in their work so that they can find their path to purpose and prosperity. She also coaches executives and top-performing teams to make more impact, excel through transition, and bring the best of themselves to their work. While Alice does not identify as creative per se, she understands how important accessing and activating creativity is in being able to imagine a better possibility after transition. On the podcast, she shares about her own struggles with her mental health, her perfectionism and limiting beliefs, and how that took such an intense toll on her body that it nearly killed her. Drawing on her experience as a medical doctor and a finance professional, Alice's approach to creative transformation blends neuroscience, systematic thinking, and creative imagination to help her clients dream up and design a more fulfilled, energized, and engaged life. Without further ado, let's dive into the conversation. Welcome to the Art of Lost and Found podcast, Alice. I'm so thrilled to have you on the show today.
Hi, Brooke. I'm really happy to be here. I think it's the first time we've seen each other on camera for a while, apart from our usual regular voice notes, our sort of long voice notes. So it's great to see you today. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I've felt a special connection and closeness to you ever since we first met, which for context, Alice was one of my clients when I was a brand strategist working with Brand Builders Group. It was an incredible experience because I got to connect with so many people who were wholeheartedly moving forward with developing their personal brands and stepping into this new identity. But also were humble enough to know that they needed support and guidance. And Brand Builders is such a wonderful container for that. And I will forever be grateful to them for connecting me to you, Alice. And I wanted to have you in particular on the podcast today because I think you have an extraordinary story. And you're one of the most intelligent, dynamic, confident, competent, skilled women that probably I've ever met. But you also have an openness and a humility and a acceptance of being in process, which from super high achievers like yourself is oftentimes difficult to step into that space of being a beginner, of learning, of finding your footing, because that challenges the identity of, doctor or finance professional or, C-level leadership position, which I know that you've held several of those titles. But being able to make the transition that you've been making over the last few years is incredibly courageous and unique. And I felt that it was important to give space for your story.
Wow, Brooke, I think that's probably the most amazing introduction I've ever had. And just to say I appreciate every word. So I'm going to be going back and listen to this and taking it all in again for the second time, maybe the third. But, you did meet me at a moment that I think I really needed to meet you. I was very vulnerable at the start of my journey. I didn't even know what I wanted to do with myself at that time. And I think you saw me really, as you say, I mean, I'm going to say it's quite clueless, but really, desperate to move forward, but not sure how. So I'll never forget the impact that you made on me. So thank you very much. And thanks for having me.
Such a pleasure. So, for the people who are listening who are not familiar with your story and your background, can you share a little bit of context for, what your journey has been and the position that you find yourself in now in terms of your identity and creating your business?
Yeah, so I'll talk about it through the lens of what I do professionally, but to just drop back a little bit to when I was a kid, I was somebody who always did quite well at school. I did work hard, always wanted to do well. And for whatever reason, I chose to go to medical school. And partly, I guess, my father was a doctor. Everyone we knew were doctors. If you did well at school, it seemed to be the thing that people would do. And I guess it was the start of me, the sort of theme I think I had for my life has been I've often been living other people's lives, not my own life. So I'd actually went against, in retrospect, I went against my intuition at the time. And when I got into medical school, I thought, brilliant, great achievement, let's go. And I was actually 17 when I started. And I had so many glimmers or messages over the years, I guess, from the universe or God or however you want to describe it or think about it, but certainly outside of myself where I thought, I just don't think I'm in the right place. But I kept going. So I got the whole way through medical school, all the years ahead of training and houseman years, etc. I moved to the UK and I actually worked as a medical doctor for about 10 years. But towards the end of that time, for a few different reasons, I was married to an addict who was an alcoholic. He had sobered up, but there was still, there'd been lots of problems for many years. So that had taken its toll. I think knowing that I wasn't in the right place for me or doing the right thing for me in my life professionally was taking its toll. I'd struggled, over the years with some mental health problems that were impacting my physical health. And I kind of reached a place of burnout. And also just waking up thinking, I always want something to happen to me so that I don't have to go into work, but still I would go in. So things are actually getting quite dark for me. Yeah. I was feeling quite desperate. And because of that, I decided to make some big changes. And I took a little bit of a break from medicine. And I did, take quite some time to explore what could I do. And because I'd had quite a commercial role in my practice that I was in, which was right in the financial district in the city in London, I met lots of people in that corporate space, in the big banks, the law firms, professional services. And I put myself out there and I just went around speaking to people and say, what would you do if you were me? I want to get out of medicine. No, I don't want to manage a hospital. No, I don't want to work in pharmaceuticals. I want to do something different. And I had been doing quite a bit of business development, going to clients, pitching, presenting, and it kind of rekindled this thing in me where I used to love doing public speaking and being on stage as a child, but it just gave me that sense of I'm doing something different and using different skills, and it was so exciting to me. And I ended up taking a role in the deals team at one of the big four professional services firms in London, which is kind of a big change from clinical medicine. Yeah. And I joined corporate finance, and I had a great career there. But I guess I hadn't addressed many of the underlying issues I'd still be struggling with. And I know the theme of your podcast is the art, lost and found. And I think I started again veering off track, losing my sense of self. And, you also allude to the fact that externally I was always seen as somebody who's a high achiever, who's doing really well. I moving into leadership positions. I had people working for me who I was responsible for. And I guess that I couldn't tell people that I wasn't really thriving and feeling great about what I was doing, and I wasn't actually coping. Yeah. Because I felt if I do that, if I go to my boss, he'll think, she can't cope with stress. And I'm like, no, I can cope with stress, but I just couldn't ask for help. And the more I struggled, the more I put on this shiny facade of everything's fine. until it
Yeah.
wasn't. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's when my marriage ended, and I really hit a very bad place with my mental health again. Still hadn't quite addressed what was going on. It impacted my physical health really badly. I had to take time off work. And during that moment, I also decided to move back to South Africa because I'm originally South African. You can likely have to hear my accent. I've been living in London for nearly 15 years. And then around this time, I thought I need to go home, which for me was actually a difficult decision because I wasn't that close to my family over the years. We'd sort of fallen separated ways a little bit, or had some struggles between us. So for me to sort of take 2 suitcases and nothing really else to my name and fly back to Cape Town and land back there. And I always tell a bit of a joke in my keynote talks about turning 40, waking up in my childhood bedroom, and how this was just not like the dream 40th, the sort of, I have had a privileged background. I've got a lot of education. I've done really well. Like, why is this, what's happening here? But, and this is shortly before I met you, I went back, COVID hit, and I was always forced, I guess, in a way to say, okay, what now? How did you, I had that sense at that time, how have I gone so far off track of who I am? And perhaps it was being back in my childhood home, bringing back memories of who I was, made me think, hang on. So it took me a long time to sort of do the work. And I know, you talked to lots of creatives. Creativity became a big thing for me at this time. But that's when I began my journey of thinking, what do I have to offer? Where can I help people? What impact can I make? How can I bring together all these different things I've been doing and form something new? And move forwards with my life. And it's been a long process, but I'm doing it. It's working. Am I iterating? Yes, all the time. I'm regularly reminded, hello, you're veering off. Come back, rediscover. So long answer, but that's kind of where I am today, where I'm my coaching and my speaking work. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all that. I think what you shared in particular about changing the external is really resonant for so many people, because that's kind of the culture that we're swimming in, is that if something's wrong, change something outside yourself.
Yeah.
Like if you're unhappy and you're feeling unfulfilled, it's probably because you have the wrong job. So quit that job and go to another job. Or if you're unhappy and unfulfilled, feeling lonely, feeling disconnected from your partner, it's probably because it's the wrong partner. Just swap your partner, change your partner, and things will be fine. And in my experience, and I think in a lot of people's experiences, that works for a little while. Like it's almost distracting. It's, you get sucked into the newness of something, you're rising to different challenges. But if you don't deal with the part that's inside you, that is the root system of all of the external manifestations of struggle, then it surfaces again, right? You're just cutting off the tops. And like, if you don't deal with the roots, it comes for you. And I think a lot of people can relate to that concept of, if I just change the external, everything else will be fine, right? If I make more money, if I move to a different place, if I like change something externally, it will deal with all the emotional stuff that I'm struggling with internally. And it's insufficient. So I'm curious, from your perspective, particularly as a medical doctor, how do you see the connection between that emotional turmoil, not having, quote unquote, done the work, not having surfaced or excavated that stuff that's inside our emotional world that controls or guides our mindset, our way of thinking, our perspective on the world? From your perspective as a medical doctor, did you see that manifesting in people's bodies? Or from your point of view at that time, it was just, you have a physical symptom, let's find the physical cause, and that should be fine? Like, what's your story with that? What did you witness at that time? And then how do you relate to that connection between the emotional experience and the physical experience now?
Yeah. So I think at the time when I was practicing medicine, how do I put this? I'd always been a very intuitive doctor.
Yeah.
And I always spent more time usually than most people would with their patients. It's just, some of it was out of fear of making a mistake or getting things wrong. So not going to make out that it's because I'm just a nice person. But I always had this sense, especially when I was more operating at my best, of there's more going on here. It's not just the physical. And I mean, I think I saw all the time people coming in who hadn't really addressed root causes, and it was playing out in the physical. And I think even with myself, I can see parallels. And if I take it back to the kind of sciencey side of it, how I understand it, is so much of it in life we are on autopilot, and we are for good reason. Because if we have to think, I need to take a step, I need to pick up my hand, you wouldn't get anything done. So we try to automate and do as much as we can reflexively without having to think about it. But this can also happen with our thoughts, our behaviors, our patterns. And I guess what I would see is, you can make some changes, but unless you are very intentional about continuing to make change, so at a brain level, that's neuroplasticity, it's hard, it takes effort, you have to have an intention there. You can't just say, hey, I'm going to start doing some things differently, think about it, even if you do a few months of work on it, and just think that things will fall into place. I actually describe it a bit like, if you've been on safari, obviously growing up in South Africa, I was very lucky to go on safari, but anywhere where there's thick vegetation, you see animals moving through thick vegetation, and you see that they have made these well-worn paths. And, over generations, the buffalo, the rhino, the elephants, they go up and down these paths for water and food. And how we think and behave and what plays out in our life is much like those paths. So even if you want to make a new path, you get your machete out, your saw, you start cutting down trees, put all that effort in, start making that new path, even start walking up and down it. That old path is still there. Sometimes the leaves come and, the trees grow over. But if you look carefully, the path is there. And if you're not intentional, you can just land up on that path. And I think that's what's happening to people, just if I break it down at the neurological level. But that's how our brains are designed. So we have to say, if I actually want to really drive change, I have to accept it's hard. I have to do the work, but I have to keep doing the work. And I think that is what I saw happen to me, but what I saw happen to so many people. People who on paper, their lives look amazing, but actually they've done some of the deep work, but they haven't kept doing it.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably where most of us, all of us, can become unstuck.
Mm-hmm. What happened in your life that you had that moment of realizing just how important and essential that is?
Truthfully, I'm reminded of it all the time because I regularly find myself back creeping on that old path. It's a very familiar path to me. And I don't mind sharing that in the last year, I became a stepmother full time to teenagers who've been through a lot of trauma. And just even the last few weeks, I've been struggling so much with myself because I don't feel good about how I'm showing up some of the time. I don't feel good about my home environment anymore because it's changed so much. And I realize it's because I have started living someone else's life and not really made that place for myself. So I'm much faster to recognize it now. So I'm quite intentional about noticing certain things in myself, certain behaviors that might start appearing, ways that I'm feeling, and to start questioning what is actually going on here. That means that I'm not feeling true to myself.
Yeah.
And that's kind of things that people call them the glimmers. So you kind of get these little messages, little things that will happen. Say, I think this is that thing happening again. And instead of blaming others or thinking, oh, maybe I need to move out or I need to get a bigger home or something that's going to fix the problem, I'm like, actually, this is my stuff. And what am I going to do to make sure that I do live the life that I know that I want to and that I can and that I deserve, I guess, which is still hard for me to say. But yeah.
Yeah. So tying that into a sense of possibility, I'd love to talk a little bit about your relationship to creativity and then invite you to speak about how you're using creativity to navigate this very particular place that you're in your life now.
Well, I'm just so happy to be asked this question because it's not one that I often get asked. And I think because I had such a science background, people just assume you're good at maths and science, and I was, but I also was always from a young age creative. I mean, I did do a lot of music at school, but more what you were talking about, that professionally trained. I did that to a high level, but I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
And it's almost even now, if I want to sit down to play the piano or the violin, I almost don't want to because I know it won't be perfect and I don't feel able to just be free and play. But I just love the whole idea of creating something out of nothing. I would even spend lots of time with my dad in the garage making things. My school projects were always like a little bit different and quite interesting. Halloween always were like, where did this kid come up with that? So that's what I loved. I absolutely loved that. But I think it kind of got a bit beaten out of me over the years. I'm a terrible drawer. Even my stick people are questionable. So I've always felt that I'm not a creator, but I can tell you that because I've had to face, being quite unwell over the years and struggling and having these real low moments where you are forced to think about, well, when did I actually feel great? When was the last time I just felt at peace and connected to the world around me? And it's always around creativity, whether it's music, nature. And actually, I have found being almost forced to or carving out time to just sit and see what comes up and create that time and just put things down on paper and just make something have been the moments that I've felt most myself again. So when I had all these moments of being unwell with my mental health, which affects my physical health to the point that I was, really critically unwell, actually nearly died on a number of occasions. And I've been through this a few times, but as part of that, I was in hospital for a while. And when I was strong enough, I was allowed to go to an art class. And this was just the best thing that ever happened to me. And all of us would sit there, all thought that we were useless. We weren't creative. Everybody said, I can't do anything. And the things that would come out of people who were at their lowest moments, just mind-blowing. And I really feel that those moments where I've had to just sit with myself and just see what comes up is what has really allowed me to reconnect with Alice as a child and who I used to be. And this is what brings me to the next piece of it, which is you have to have imagination if you want to, I believe, dream of this life that you want to build for yourself.
Yeah.
It comes out of imagination.
Yeah.
And that's so important in terms of thinking about what could the future look like. And in some of this branding work I've been doing recently, I wrote down creating exciting futures for people is what I feel that I can do. What's possible for myself, what's possible for others. And that comes from imagination.
Mm-hmm.
Getting out of your way, dealing with some of those self-limiting beliefs, tapping into who you are again, and getting excited about the art of the possible.
Yeah.
And so that actually, I think you asked me the second part of it, if I'm correct, and what do I do today with creativity to help me and maybe even my clients? I guess it's around this idea of future you and identity. And I think it's Einstein who says something like, our imagination is the preview to our life's greatest adventures. So, it's having that ability to stop and think, who am I becoming? Who do I want to be? How do I want to show up? And setting that as your intention and actually starting to step into that energy now. How to, I say, be your future self now. So start thinking, feeling, and acting like that person now. And there's lots of things that I do around visualization, trying to feel the feelings of what it would be like to be me in this life that I'm trying to generate, or I should say generating for myself.
Mm-hmm.
and actually using that imagination to create new ways of thinking and feeling. And I know, again, from a science point of view, that's actually doing things to our brains. It's rewiring them.
Yeah.
So there's lots of things there that I think without creativity, you can make changes, but you're not going to necessarily make the change that you really want for yourself or really deserve, or, the same with helping others. And I guess that
Yeah.
ties in a lot with identity, which I know is something you've spoken about with others before. But yeah,
Oh yeah.
all kind of
Yeah.
ties in together.
I love the way that you speak about creativity in this context, because this is part of my mission with this podcast and with the work that I'm doing, is to liberate the this concept of creativity so that it's accessible for everybody. And when you talk about creativity from a place of imagination, it has nothing to do with fine art skills. Like
Nothing.
nothing to do with
Thank
it.
goodness.
Thank goodness. Yeah.
For me, for
Um,
me.
but I mean, for everybody, because even what you said about your stick figures, is like, yeah, like a child draws stick figures that are questionable also, but the more stick figures they draw, the more recognizable they become. So this idea that, so many of us are quick to say, I'm not creative. It's like, yeah, probably because you tried something and you were turned off because you didn't think you were very good, which is most things at the beginning, even like
Exactly.
walking, talking, like, wiping your own ass. Like, we have to learn how to do all of this,
Exactly.
the most basic, mundane things. We get better and better the more time we're willing to dedicate towards it. And I think a lot of people who embrace this idea of creativity, they understand that it's so much more expansive than that, and that it originates in our imagination. Being able to, I love the way that you phrase this, help people imagine a better future for themselves, is the starting point of everything. And that you and
Yeah.
I meet in that. Our work definitely overlaps in that space. And then, another similarity between our work is once we can invite somebody to embrace that future that excites them, that makes them feel alive, that awakens some like potent energy that can give
Okay.
them energy and motivation and enthusiasm, then our roles, although we help in very different ways, help them then
Yeah.
execute that.
Yeah.
Like, you have
Exactly
to
that.
start with that imagination. That's like the taking off. That's getting flight, right? But then you got to land the plane. Otherwise, like, you're going to run out of fuel. You're going to, get hungry. You're going to run out of, things to see. Like, eventually you need to come to some destination,
Yeah.
and that's where the execution becomes that complementary part of the process. But if you come in just with the execution and you don't leave space for that creative imagination, then the way that I've articulated this, and I've definitely done this with past clients, is I would build them golden cages.
Yeah.
Like, this
It's
is what you said you
it's,
wanted.
I think about it like it's a fear-based decision that people will make
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
because
they
they
have
haven't.
something
Yeah.
that looks good on the outside,
Yeah.
or that feels like they're supposed to, okay, you were a medical doctor. What a huge accomplishment. Then into corporate finance. Wow, how cool. Like, but it didn't, those were golden cages that you had built for yourself. And it usually takes something dramatic, something painful, something like identity shaking to create that existential, thought process of like, what am I even doing? I just want to burn it all to the ground. And
Well,
being able to then hold yourself and support yourself in that process until you reorient to, oh, I don't have to burn it all down. I actually could build something else. Like, stepping into that energy is really potent. So can you share a little bit about how you do that in your work? How you do that for yourself, and also how you do that in your work with your clients or the people that you speak to? Like, what is that process from your particular offering?
So I have a process which sometimes I have to flex a little bit depending on where someone is, but it's kind of what I did for myself. And for me, it starts with what is holding you back. So to have a little phrase, I think it's when you see your shackles to break through to your brilliance. So what are those self-limiting beliefs that are holding you back? And I think you actually introduced me to the work of Britt Frank and the benefits of being stuck. I think she's written that book. And so many of us are trapped for many reasons, but often because it's of benefit to us in some way. So I do start with a kind of mindset piece and figuring out with people where they may have some false and self-limiting beliefs and begin to challenge them. Because unless you really do that, you can't help people just start to get out of their way. You need to start breaking through and opening up so that you can begin to get to that space of imagination, creating a new exciting future for yourself, or at least imagining the art of the possible. So many people are quite shut down when they come to see me. They say, well, I'm a director in finance and I want to do something more meaning, but if I become a yoga teacher, then I won't be able to pay for my school fees and my home. Like, it's not one or the other. It's not like that. Or I think even actually if I look back at my finance role, in many ways it was an excellent role for me. And if I had done the work that I'd done after I left during it, I may still be there and I may just be showing up differently. So it's not always about you're in the wrong place. It is, as we said, that the sort of deeper work and then deciding what you want to do. So I guess self-limiting beliefs is the first thing. And then I start trying to help people rewire up and refire up new ways of thinking. So there's a lot around kind of well-being there and creating space and time for innovative thought, which was actually something that came up when you were talking about the advantage of creativity back in our sort of caveman days. Is who would have thought, here's a stick and here's a this, and I'm going to make fire. It takes a special kind of brain, right, to imagine that. So I'll work with people to start thinking about actually using visualization, because it's neuroscience. So a lot of my clients, because they're quite sort of skeptical about anything that sounds too woo-woo, I can actually say, look, this is why it works. This is how it works. So I get them to start thinking, feeling differently. And then as we move into that space, I begin the process of, people will say, what's my purpose? Or should I follow my passion? And I spend some time working with people to figure out what are your natural gifts, or you might call it your zone of genius, or, it could be flow, but more, who are you meant to be? Yeah. You're born with gifts. How can we find out what those are, blend them with your experience, and bring your sort of full self to what you do? And I've got some really simple and really helpful little exercises. I think I actually heard you chatting to someone else on the podcast where I call it a self-audit, but basically go around, find 10 people and ask them, where do you see me at my best? What am I doing? Who am I with? What's around me? What's the environment? Start to get that reflection from others about where they see you truly thriving. Yeah. What are your natural strengths? And I also do an exercise where we look at tapping at your feelings, which people can be resistant to do. So during my day, where do I feel excited? Where do I feel engaged? And a lot of what I do actually comes from that Life by Design book.
Yeah.
Which I think you also use the work of, I think it's Dave Burnett, Bill Evans. I think those are their names. Where you really actually practically have a little logbook. I make all my clients do this. Write down, on a scale of 1 to 10, the 2 E's, I call it, engaged and excited.
Yeah.
And you can see, so I could be in a meeting and I could be really engaged because I have to pay attention. But when I leave, my energy is really low. I'm kind of exhausted. I'm depleted. But I could be in a meeting, but this time I'm presenting. So I'm engaged, but I leave feeling really energized. So, you've got engagement, you've got energy, basically. And so same environment, same job, but feeling two different ways. So I obviously want to spend more of my time where both of those levels are high.
Yeah.
Where you're feeling engaged and your energy it's replenishing you. It's feeding you. It's not just draining from you all the time.
Yeah.
And those are the sorts of things. Then out of that, we start thinking about, okay, so what do you really want? This is the designing your life part.
Yeah.
What's your view of life? What's your view of work? What are your actual values? What do you really want? Because what I want and you want could be two different things, and that's okay.
And that's beautiful. It's beautiful.
And
There's room for everybody.
And I get people to map out, like, what do you want to earn?
Yeah.
What do you actually need? What do you need? What don't you want? And to actually be clear, especially about the what don't you want parts.
Yeah.
And then we start generating ideas and options. And from there, I guess I still feel like it's a creative process. Get out there, tell your story, ask people, what they are doing, learn from others, have conversations, put yourself out there. And the opportunities that come out when you do that, presenting now as this sort of, you've done this bit of discovery work with yourself, presenting that to the world, boy, do the doors just start opening.
Right.
I literally had an email from a client 20 minutes before us meeting today. When I met him, he lives in Australia, which I just love working with people from all over the world. He is an anaesthetist. I think he's about 40. And when I met him, he wouldn't mind me using the words. He was miserable. And he said, I don't know if I'm just grumpy and kind of hitting middle age, having a crisis, but I don't think I'm making the most of who I am as a doctor. And I heard from my friend that you left and can you help me? But I just want to know, first of all, should I be staying in medicine or not? Over 6 months, he now emailed me. He has so many opportunities. He's going to get to pick and choose what he wants to do.
Wow.
Building a sort of career for himself with different sort of roles. He's involved with all sorts of exciting things. He's been on lots of radio shows and media things because he's into sustainability within healthcare. Something that he's just passionate about and being interested in. He's actually building a whole new thing for himself and probably ultimately a business. But it's because of doing exactly all the things we've spoken about. Yeah. Essentially reminding himself of who he really is, getting back on the path, this lost and found. He was lost, he's finding himself again. And I cannot believe the doors that are just opening for him. It's literally so exciting. And he's very energized every time I see him or talk to him. He's so excited about life. Yeah, just totally different person.
Yeah, I think there's a few different explanations for that experience that we all know. Like we've all had that experience where when we let go of some type of limitation and we start putting ourselves out there, it's like the ground rises to meet us in some way or another. And, of course, there's the spiritual explanation of, if you reach out to the universe responds to you. But I think there's also a more grounded, logical, scientific explanation that was brought to my attention in a really cool study from a long time ago around people who identified as being lucky and people who identified as being unlucky. And they basically ran them through a bunch of experiments to see, like, is there any truth to it? And their ultimate conclusion in the series of experiments they did was people who identified as being lucky had a wider field of perception. They were open to more possibilities. They literally saw things that were right in front of, or the people who identified as unlucky literally did not see things that were right in front of them because they already had a fixed idea of what was possible.
Exactly.
My partner not that long ago was looking for something in the refrigerator and it was on a different shelf than it usually is. And he was like, I can't find it. I said, it's in the refrigerator. And he said, I looked there already. And I literally walked over with him, opened the refrigerator and said, it's right there. But he couldn't see it because in that moment, a silly, insignificant example, but it's this idea of like confirmation bias or, limiting your field of perception. what is going on with that from like a brain, neuroscience perspective? What is that thing?
All I know is because I'm a big Andrew Huberman fan, and he actually recently brought on, or he's brought in a few times, I think, a woman called Alia Crum, CRUM, and she's also at Stanford. And she's done a lot of work into belief mindsets, that
Yeah.
basically what you believe plays out physically. I mean, it's unbelievable. So if you believe that something is bad for you, um, you will have detrimental impact on your health.
Mm-hmm.
If you believe that the exercises you're doing are not actually going to really improve your fitness, it won't improve your fitness as much as if you think it's doing brilliant things for you. This comes
So
down to what we
wild.
eat, the exercise we do. It's literally the chemicals they've measured, our hunger hormones in response to whether we think something is filling or not. It's crazy. So I think that if you believe that you deserve a great life, that everything you have, everything already within you, that's it's kind of about having that courage to step forward and be who you are and meet the world, or however you want to put it. I'm trying to think about how to describe it, but that feeling, if you believe that the good will come, and I mean it just does. And I think so
Yeah.
much of it is about must be also about the energy that you bring. How we as humans, we have these things called mirror neurons. So if I bring a certain energy to our conversation, you will be tapping into that. So it's kind of, we're all connected literally through, we actually rewire our others' brains just being in each other's proximity, of how we communicate with each other, how we care for each other, talk to each other. So I think it is science and it is woo-woo. It's all the same thing. But
Yeah.
I think that there's very, very, very powerful evidence to say that what we believe plays out.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think
Isn't that
something we
so
can do
cool?
is be honest
It's
with ourselves.
so
Like,
cool.
is what I'm believing holding me back? Should I be thinking and questioning some of what I believe?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I heard a quote once that I think forever changed my life, and it was something along the lines of those who believe in their limitations, or those who fight to keep their limitations, get to keep them.
yeah,
It's just this mindset game that you know, is something that I think is being talked about more and more particularly in the entrepreneurial space and in the mental health space around just it's not about thinking positive, but
no,
it's about leaving space for creative imagination in a way that gives you life and that serves you, right? It's so easy for us to like imagine and use our overactive imaginations on the bad things that could happen. Oh no, like my boss said something iffy to me, like I'm probably going to get fired, and then I'm going to lose my job, and then I won't be able to pay rent, and then I'm going to have to move back in with my parents, and oh my god, I'm turning 40, and like it's so easy to activate the imagination to create an incredibly vivid and visceral doomsday
yeah,
experience. So I think being able to build the skill of doing that, what if it works out in my favor? What if it's even
exactly.
better than I imagine? And allowing yourself to build up that same, like basically the opposite of the super easy slide into doomsday fantasy,
Yeah,
into this, how do I amplify and expand the art of what's possible? And being able to guide people and help them through that process, I know for me, gives me so much life and so much energy in my work, is helping people expand a sense of what's possible for them,
yeah,
because the execution, the building piece of it, in my opinion, that's kind of the easy part. You can do that work continuously over a period
exactly.
of time, but the bigger lift feels like that mindset piece.
Yep. What someone who comes to mind, if you don't mind me sharing, is actually Viktor Frankl. And I
Yeah.
actually use his story often because, you know, he was caught up in the concentration camps. He was Austrian Jew. And he was actually writing a manuscript at the start of the war. He lost everybody close to him through the camps, and he had held onto that manuscript the whole way through. And because he was a researcher, he was actually a neuroscientist and psychiatrist and medical doctor, but the Nazi guards found his manuscript and destroyed it. And in that moment, he had a choice, and that's the bit I wanted to draw out here. He could have chosen to say, that's it, I'm done. I'm going to die. Everyone else has died. I see everyone else dying around me. But he, being a scientific person who was interested in human behavior, he had noticed that the people who were surviving and making it through, on the whole, were people who chose to have a sense of future self. So he, in that moment, made a choice, which is kind of what we're talking about today. So he used his imagination. He created a vision of future Viktor Frankl. In his mind, it was, when I get out of here, I will complete my manuscript. I will publish it as a book, and I will sell this book. And that's what he lived by. And every day he found a way to keep going with that vision. And actually, that's exactly what happened. I think a year after leaving Auschwitz, or whichever camp he was in at the end, he had published and sold that book. And then he obviously went on to write Man's Search for Meaning. But I'm always reminded by that. You have the choice to decide whether you want to explore the art of the possible, tap into your imagination, do some of what is uncomfortable, figure out who am I really, how to bring yourself out, create this future vision for yourself. And that's what he did. So that's something that I still draw on all the time. In fact, even with my clients. So that choice part of it, I think, is still, you have to want to do it.
Yeah. Can you share about a time in your life where you've been at that choice point? Because sometimes it's really easy to recognize, like it's a big, massive thing. And other times it can show up more subtly. So can you share maybe some examples from your own life, or even in working with clients, of that choice point and how you recognize it and how you show up for it?
I've had some big choice moments. One that jumps to mind is actually just before we met. I had signed up to a program called like a Purpose MBA. I think it was through someone like Jay Shetty. And when I joined that, I was thinking, I want to start a business. I don't know what it is, but I had never for a minute thought it would be a personal brand, that my name or face would be on anything. And through a series of events, I realized that if I really wanted to make an impact and use my natural gifts, it was going to mean that I would have to step up into the world and show people who I am. And because of what had gone on with my health and my mental health before that, I felt I had believed till that moment that I wouldn't be able to. That was a belief. You can't do that. You need to make organic dog food, or, or something like that. So I'm thinking, what could I do? And it was through facing, also getting some of these glimmers and messages from people like, Alice, you've got so much more in you. And taking that, making the choice, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start putting myself out there. I think around the time I joined Brand Builders Group, which is how we met, I had almost refused to ever be on a Zoom call. So, for me to go from that to where I'm now, talking on stage, Zoom calls all the time, based on social media, that for me is incredible. So I still hate photos and I'll avoid them at all costs, but I made that choice. So that was a big one. So I think that's one good example, actually, of where I decided I'll go against how I feel, I'll go against what I thought I believed, and I will try something different. And boy, it was frightening. And I think even when I was working with you, I had to go and do some headshots. And I cried for days before, I cried afterwards.
They're so beautiful, though. They're so beautiful. I was just like, wow, that's it. Like, I can feel the wisdom. I can feel the power. I can feel the experience. I can feel that you really fully showed up for that. Because I remember it was during that time that I was doing your website, and we needed
Yeah.
images of you
Yeah.
for your website.
Yeah.
And I remember being so impressed, and the sense of pride also, that you showed up for that, even though you were scared, even though you were insecure, even though you're like, oh my God, what am I even doing? Is this it? Like, I want to run and hide. Pushing through the feelings of discomfort because you knew that it was in service of this larger
Yeah.
experiment that you were doing.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I said in the intro about your bravery and your courage. That's what I meant by that.
Yeah.
I was thinking in particular about that time where you had to push through a lot of discomfort and limitations, because even though you were still feeling them, you understood that it wasn't intuition, right?
Yeah.
Like when we have a feeling of, uh-oh, I don't want to do this, this is a bad idea, like we have to trace the root of that to identify, is that coming from old stuff and fear, or is that coming from intuition? And you were
Exactly.
able to recognize, no, that's fear stuff. So, oh, fuck, okay, I got to do this. Like, here I go.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny that we're both thinking around the same time, and even just making the decision that it's going to be Alice Payne, Dr. Alice Payne or Alice Payne
Yeah.
MD or whatever. I think people who were close to me at the time could not believe it.
Mm.
I'm so proud of myself, honestly, that I did do it. And I've met so many people, and my life has just changed so much. Do I still have struggles all the time?
Yeah.
Do I still battle some of those demons every day?
Yeah.
But I'm making that choice. This is what I want to do. This is what I know is right for me. So I kind of have to do it. I owe it to myself. I owe it to God, the universe, whatever, because I know that this is what I'm meant to be doing. I'm obviously still iterating all the time. How, exactly, who,
Yeah.
it continues to change as I get to know myself better. I think actually this is the bit that I think I should really play more in this space. But yeah, it goes beyond just you and how you feel into kind of what are you. I'm not religious, but I do believe in God. I do believe in something bigger than myself. I know that I think because I had these near-death moments, I totally believe that if I was meant to have died, I would have. And that there's a reason I'm still here. And that is what's always driven me. It sounds very dramatic, but it really is what drove me to say there is a reason.
Yeah.
I have got more to give. It's my duty in a way to figure out what that is and make the most of being on the earth and the opportunities I've had and actually find a way forwards. That's kind of has always been the reason that I've kept doing the work, because of this deep-seated, if I wasn't meant to be here, I wouldn't be here. I'm here.
Yeah.
I need to do something with it. And I think, that's kind of what still drives me every day.
Yeah. If you could say something to your younger self, perhaps during that time of darkness and close to the edge, what wisdom or offering would you give to yourself in that moment? What would you tell her?
I think it would be, apart from it's going to be okay, come with me, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
I think I would want to encourage her to not have to feel the need to be perfect. Just say, I think I don't have kids of my own, but I guess it's a similar thing. I'd want her to believe, or want my own children to believe, you as how you are is good enough. You don't need to do the whole time. Because that's kind of how my life kept going and still does, off path, and have to find your way back. So I think it's around the essence of you are okay as you are amazing at who you are. Just if you be that person 100%, everything is going to work out for you, because that's how you're designed to be. Yeah. Whether she would have listened, probably not. But I would have tried.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's something really healing in thinking about it from that perspective, right? It's like your current self reflecting back on using your imagination, that you could sit with
Yeah,
yourself in that moment, in that like ugly shower cry, like whatever your version of that just low moment is, of being able to sit with yourself and offer wisdom, compassion, love, presence. It
sure.
feels so healing. And then to what we've spoken so much about on this podcast is about this concept of the future self,
Yeah,
right? Because presumably, hopefully, our lives will continue, right? And we'll have an opportunity. Who knows? Maybe you'll be on the podcast in 10 years, hopefully,
I hope so.
in 10 years. And I could ask you the same question of what would you tell yourself back in that moment? And this idea of being able to use your imagination to see yourself and connect with yourself from these different vantage points. You know, we talked about that in the here and now. Like, what can you imagine feeling?
Yeah, yeah,
Right? How do you want to feel every day? Like, sit with that so you can embody the experience as much as possible. Um, is so essential for unlocking and liberating
we're
that creative potential, right? And in that
completely.
creative potential is healing and letting go of what's no longer there, so that you can continue focusing on what you want to create. Just like an artist has to make a ton of material in order for beautiful things to surface. So you have to excavate, you have to clear, you have to weed, you have to, in your frameworks, address those limiting beliefs and get them by the root and pull them out, right? And then you create space for new seeds and new ideas. And then the process of being able to grow those is nurturing them. What you were talking
Exactly.
about with neuroplasticity and carving a new pathway, that's not a one-time thing. It's something you have
No,
to walk every day. It's, I think, just as much spiritual as it is scientific. And I think the
exactly.
healthiest, happiest people among us are people who are connected to both pieces of that and have the
Exactly.
capacity to imagine a future for themselves that is more nourishing and enriching than whatever came before it.
Yeah, it's, I love the way you described that.
Is there anything else that feels important to share or to speak to before we wrap up this conversation?
No, I think for me, I've really enjoyed talking. I'll probably talk to you for a lot longer. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it.
Beautiful. And for people who want to learn more about you, maybe work with you, follow your journey, what's the best opportunity for them to do that?
So you can head to my website, alicepennmd.com, and I've got some useful little downloads there around how to actually take, the 4 steps to take to start fulfilling your potential in your work or feeling more fulfilled in your work. I also have a little neuroscience toolkit to help people, again, feel more excited about work and to excel at work. And then I'm also on LinkedIn. Just look for me, Alice Penn MD, and on Instagram, the same thing. So take a look.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for making the time and for showing up so fully for this important conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. You're very talented at what you do. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Art of Lost and Found podcast. I hope that you are feeling inspired and empowered to go forth and explore your curiosity and creativity. As always, you can head over to www.brookeeston.com/podcast. Thank you so much, and looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.